picture a massive global consumer electronics company. Let's say they've just spent, I don't know, the last 3 years developing this revolutionary new smartwatch.
Okay, setting the stage. I like it.
Right. So the CEO goes on stage, does the classic dramatic reveal, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. The corporate strategy is clear, right? Dominate the wearable tech market.
Yeah, very clear.
And the business strategy is super aggressive. They want to undercut competitors on price while, offering a premium design. So marketing goes and spends $50 million on this massive global ad blitz.
A very expensive promise to make.
Exactly. So launch day arrives, the stores open their doors, the customers rush in.
And the shelves are completely empty.
Empty. Literally nothing there.
Yeah, it's the ultimate nightmare scenario for a chief executive. And sadly, it is far more common than most people outside the C-suite actually realize.
Which is wild to think about because the company had the vision, right? They had the market demand. They clearly had the capital. But when you dig into the post-mortem, you find out that, well, the operations department just hadn't been given the budget to upgrade their assembly lines to handle the new curved glass screens.
Right.
Meanwhile, the HR department had been, simultaneously running this retrenchment strategy, laying off senior supply chain managers to cut overhead.
Wow. Talk about a disconnect.
Exactly. The grand vision died not because it was a bad idea, but because the internal gears of the company were just grinding in completely opposite directions.
Okay.
So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
If you are an MBA student listening to this right now, staring down a mountain of notes, chugging your third iced coffee, and dreading your upcoming exams, I see you. We're going to be your ultimate study companion today.
Absolutely. Because rote memorization will only get you so far, especially at the MBA level.
Right. Our goal isn't just to help you memorize a bunch of definitions so you can, regurgitate them on a test and forget them tomorrow. We are going to unpack the actual gritty mechanics of how businesses get things done.
Yeah, to truly excel, both on this exam and eventually in the boardroom, you really have to internalize the underlying logic. You have to see these invisible threads connecting abstract corporate theories to the tangible, sometimes messy realities of running a company.
And to do that, we are diving into a very specific, incredibly crucial set of notes and excerpts from Chapter 13 of your strategic management textbook. The focus is functional and operational implementation.
Which is really the stuff that makes or breaks a company.
Totally. Our mission today is to extract the core tenets of this chapter, flesh them out with the how and the why, and hand them to you so you can walk into that exam room with total, unshakable confidence.
And the source material provides a really comprehensive overview of the entire operational landscape. But given the structure of most strategic management exams, we're going to be highly technical with our time today.
Smart. So where are we focusing?
Well, we will cover the breadth of the operational engine, sure, but we are putting a massive, unmistakable spotlight on two heavy-hitting topics: functional strategies and industrial relations.
Got it.
Those are the areas where the nuance truly matters, and frankly, where exam questions tend to be the most rigorous.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are transitioning from the lofty heights of corporate strategy, the grand visions, the mission statements, the CEO's keynote speeches, down into the trenches where the actual sweaty day-to-day work happens.
The real work.
Exactly. So let's start with the blueprint itself, decoding functional strategies. Because before we look at specific departments like marketing or finance, we need to understand what a functional strategy actually is, like mechanically speaking, and why it exists.
Right. And the text provides a really rigorous definition that serves as our foundation here. It says, functional strategy is the approach taken by a functional area to achieve corporate and business unit objectives. And it achieves this primarily by maximizing resource productivity. Furthermore, it focuses on developing and nurturing a distinctive competence to provide the company or, a specific business unit within that company with a sustainable competitive advantage.
Okay. So it's essentially taking the massive, intimidating goals of the entire corporation and figuring out how to squeeze the absolute most value out of the specific resources you have in your unique department.
That's a great way to put it. To visualize its place in the organizational ecosystem, you really have to understand the hierarchy.
Right, it's layered.
Exactly. It always starts at the top with corporate strategy that dictates the long-term direction and the overall scope of the entire firm.
The big picture.
The biggest. From there, you step down one level to business strategy, which outlines the competitive posture of the operations within a specific industry or market segment.
Okay.
And finally, you reach the base of the pyramid, which is functional strategy. This is where the business strategy is distilled, clarified, and translated into specific short-term guidance for operating managers.
You know, let me try a military analogy here, because I think it helps visualize the translation of intent.
Go for it.
So the corporate strategy is the four-star general looking at a map of the entire continent. The general says, we need to secure that mountain range to win the war. That's the long-term direction and scope.
Right.
Then the business strategy is the captain on the ground looking at one specific hill in that range. The captain decides to take this hill, we're going to flank left and use the tree line for cover rather than charging straight up the middle. So that's the competitive posture in the specific arena.
Which leaves the functional strategy.
Right. The functional strategy is the quartermaster. The quartermaster doesn't decide which hill to take, but they have to make sure every single soldier has, boots that grip the mud, enough ammunition for a sustained firefight, and a full canteen. Meanwhile, the training officer, who is another functional manager, is running drills to ensure the soldiers know exactly how to execute a flanking maneuver under fire. It's the short-term, highly specific guidance that actually allows the captain's plan to survive contact with reality.
That analogy holds up perfectly, really, because it captures the absolute dependency between the layers. I mean, the general's vision and the captain's tactical brilliance are entirely useless if the quartermaster forgets to order ammunition.
Right.
Or if the training officer focused on, parade ground marching instead of actual combat maneuvers. The functional strategies are the load-bearing walls of the entire operation.
But let me push back on this a bit, because it almost sounds a little like micromanagement.
How so?
Well, if the business strategy is good enough, if the captain's plan to flank left is brilliant and communicated clearly to the troops, shouldn't the functional departments just inherently know what to do? If the goal is obvious, aren't functional strategies just redundant paperwork that slows down smart people?
What's fascinating here is that the illusion of business is that a brilliant idea simply executes itself. But the reality is that execution is never automatic. Functional managers are dealing with limited budgets, conflicting priorities, and hundreds of micro-decisions every single day.
So they need a roadmap.
They need explicit guidance to make decisions that align with the broader company, rather than just, optimizing for their own department's convenience. The textbook actually outlines Gluck and Jack's 5 reasons for the need for functional strategies.
Oh, this sounds like a great test question.
It is. If I were an MBA student preparing for an exam, I would pay very close attention to the underlying mechanics of these 5 reasons. Take notes here.
Okay, I got to just ask you to listen. Let's break them down. If reason number 1 is about ensuring strategic decisions are implemented across all parts of the organization, how does that actually play out in a boardroom?
Consider a company pivoting from being a premium high-cost provider to a budget-friendly volume player.
Okay, huge shift.
Exactly. If you don't have a functional strategy forcing every department to align with this new reality, human nature takes over. The engineers in R&D will keep designing products with expensive premium materials because that's what they enjoy doing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So the functional strategy is the mechanism that forces R&D to stop using titanium and start using cost-effective plastics. It prevents rogue departments from pursuing their own localized interests at the expense of the corporate pivot.
That makes a lot of sense. And that leads right into the second reason the text gives, which is providing a basis for controlling activities. You can't manage what you haven't defined, right?
Precisely. If there is no specific functional strategy for a department, the CEO has absolutely no metric against which to measure their performance.
Right. They're flying blind.
Yeah. Without a functional strategy, a department manager could spend their entire budget on an initiative that yields terrible results and simply argue, well, I was trying my best to help the company.
And you can't really fire them for trying.
Exactly. A functional strategy establishes the control metrics. It says, your strategy is to reduce customer churn by 10% through proactive outreach. If churn only drops by 2%, well, the executive team has a clear, agreed-upon basis to intervene and control the activity.
So it's accountability.
Yeah.
Okay, the third reason from Gluck and Jauk is my favorite. It's reducing decision-making time for managers. It's the idea of pre-making decisions to clear the runway for actual work.
Because decision fatigue is a real operational bottleneck. Imagine a marketing manager for an airline that has just adopted a strict, low-cost business strategy.
Correct.
If they don't have a clear functional strategy, they might waste weeks taking pitches from ad agencies proposing multi-million-dollar celebrity endorsement campaigns.
Oh man, what a waste of time.
Right. The functional marketing strategy should explicitly state, all marketing efforts will utilize low-cost digital channels focused on price comparison metrics. That single sentence eliminates weeks of wasted debate. The manager simply rejects the celebrity pitch in 5 seconds and moves on.
It's a strategic guardrail. Which brings us to the fourth reason. Ensuring similar situations occurring in different functional areas are handled consistently. But why does consistency matter so much at the functional level?
Because inconsistency destroys brand equity and internal culture. If the IT department's functional strategy prioritizes massive budget cuts, they might start aggressively denying software licenses to employees.
Which makes everyone miserable.
Right. But if the HR department's functional strategy is focused on maximizing employee satisfaction and retention, they are promising top-tier tools and resources to new hires.
Oh, I see.
You suddenly have 2 departments handling employee requests in completely contradictory ways. Functional strategies synchronize these approaches, so the company presents a unified front, both internally and externally.
And the final reason ties it all together. Ensuring coordination across different functions takes place where necessary. Like we said earlier, you can't launch a new product if R&D, manufacturing, marketing, and finance aren't reading from the same sheet music. So for the MBA student listening, mastering this concept isn't just about passing a test. It's about career survival.
I cannot stress this enough. Most MBA graduates do not start their careers as CEOs setting corporate strategy.
As much as they'd like to think so.
Right. You will likely enter the workforce at this functional level. You might be a financial analyst, a brand manager, or a supply chain lead. Understanding how your daily departmental choices roll up and connect to the CEO's grand vision is the single most effective way to demonstrate strategic value to your superiors.
That's how you stand out.
Absolutely. The people who get promoted are the ones who can explain why optimizing their specific supply chain route is critical to winning the broader industry war.
So we've established the blueprint. We know why we need functional strategies to prevent chaos. Now we have to look at how these strategies are formulated in the 2 areas that represent the lifeblood of the company, the money and the market. Let's start with financial strategy, because it doesn't matter how great the marketing plan is if the company can't pay the electric bill.
Financial management strategy fundamentally revolves around 2 massive pillars, the acquisition of funds and the utilization of funds.
Okay, getting it and spending it.
Simply put, yes. How a company chooses to source its capital and how it chooses to deploy it dictates everything else the business can attempt to do.
Let's assume our listener understands the basic difference between equity, issuing stock, diluting ownership, but avoiding debt, and borrowing, taking on debt, paying interest, but keeping ownership intact.
Yeah.
What are the strategic implications of these choices for a functional manager?
Well, the strategic implications are enormous because the method of acquisition dictates the company's operational freedom.
How so?
If a functional financial strategy relies heavily on borrowing, the company will be subject to debt covenants imposed by the banks. These covenants might restrict the company from making risky R&D investments or launching aggressive price wars.
Because the bank just wants their money back.
Exactly. The bank wants a guaranteed, stable cash flow to ensure they get their interest payments. Conversely, acquiring funds through equity might give the company more operational freedom to take risks, but now the executives are answering to activist shareholders.
Ah, and they want quick results.
Right. They might demand short-term profitability over long-term growth. The financial strategy dictates the master the company must serve.
Okay, and then there is the utilization of funds. Once you have the money, where do you actually put it? The text discusses the strategic choice of deploying funds into fixed assets, like buying a massive new factory, versus current assets, like holding on to cash or building up inventory.
Right, and this decision is heavily influenced by the broader corporate context. The text explicitly notes that long-term capital investment decisions, such as deciding whether to buy a building or lease one, are not made in a vacuum.
Makes sense.
If a company is executing a retrenchment strategy, meaning they are struggling, shrinking operations, and they really need to cut costs, or if there's simply a paucity of available funds in the market, the financial strategy will almost certainly compel them to lease.
Why leasing specifically?
Leasing preserves capital. Buying a factory locks up millions of dollars that a struggling company might need just to make payroll next month.
The text brings up a fascinating concept regarding utilization in decentralized organizations, the hurdle rate.
Hmm.
Let's go deep on this because it sounds like perfect exam material.
Yeah.
How does a hurdle rate actually function in practice?
Imagine you are the CFO of a massive conglomerate with dozens of different divisions.
Okay.
The manager of the software division comes to you asking for $10 million to develop a new app. The next day, the manager of the heavy machinery division asks for $10 million to upgrade a manufacturing plant. Both managers will present beautiful slideshows promising great returns. As the CFO, how do you decide objectively?
Right. You can't just go by who has the better PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. You establish a hurdle rate as part of your financial strategy. A hurdle rate is the minimum acceptable rate of return on an investment. It is a strict mathematical guardrail.
Give me an example.
If the corporate hurdle rate is set at 12%, you apply that to both proposals. If the software division's projected return on investment is only 8%, the project is immediately rejected.
This doesn't clear the hurdle.
It doesn't clear the hurdle. If the machinery division projects a 15% return, it gets funded. The hurdle rate standardizes the evaluation process, removes emotional bias, and ensures the company is only utilizing funds on projects that actually outpace the cost of the capital itself.
That is a brilliant mechanism. Now, closely tied to this is the functional strategy surrounding cash flow. The textbook points out that cash flow considerations dictate policies that might seem completely unrelated on the surface. It gives the example of bonus and dividend policies.
This is a classic cause and effect scenario that professors absolutely love to test. A company might frame its dividend policy entirely based on its corporate expansion strategy.
Okay, how did that work?
If the corporate strategy dictates aggressive internal expansion, meaning the company wants to grow by building its own new facilities rather than acquiring existing companies, they are going to need a massive reserve of cash.
Because building factories is incredibly capital intensive.
Precisely. Therefore, the financial strategy must respond by hoarding cash. This means the functional manager will dictate a severe reduction or even a complete suspension of dividends paid out to shareholders.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They might also freeze employee bonuses. The strategic need for internal expansion directly causes the functional decision to cut shareholder payouts.
That's a perfect example of the invisible threads you mentioned earlier. A shareholder might be furious about their dividend being cut, completely unaware that the cut was dictated by a 10-year corporate plan to build a new headquarters.
Exactly.
The text also mentions that the risk profile of the business dictates the debt-to-equity ratio. Why must a high-risk business adopt a conservative financial strategy?
Because high risk essentially means high volatility in revenue. Think of a startup in an unproven tech sector, or a company drilling for oil in unmapped territories.
Boom or bust.
Exactly. 1 month they might make millions, the next 3 months they might make literally nothing. If that company has a massive debt burden, they still owe massive fixed interest payments to the bank every single month, regardless of revenue.
And the bank doesn't care if you had a bad month.
No, they don't. A string of bad months will lead to a default and bankruptcy. Therefore, the financial strategy for a high-risk business must mandate a conservative debt-to-equity ratio relying much more on equity, so they don't have those crushing fixed interest payments hanging over their heads during the inevitable lean times.
Okay, let's look at the other side of the coin, the market, the marketing strategy. The textbook focuses on the classic 4 Ps, product design, distribution or place pricing, and promotion. But it goes beyond just defining them. It explores how they must adapt to the corporate strategy.
The functional marketing strategy gets incredibly granular. For the product aspect, it isn't simply a directive to make a high-quality item. The strategy must dictate the exact variety of shapes, sizes, and models.
Right.
It must define the precise quality requirements based on a deep understanding of the exact nature of the target customers. Are you building a watch meant to last a lifetime? Or a disposable fashion accessory meant to be replaced next season?
The functional strategy answers that question. And for distribution, the policies have to solve the geographical and logistical puzzle. Like, are we bypassing retailers and utilizing a direct-to-consumer digital model?
Right.
Are we heavily investing in developing our existing dealership networks or opening entirely new ones in emerging markets? What is the exact spread of our network required to meet our revenue targets?
Then we arrive at pricing, which is arguably the most dynamic lever a functional marketing manager can pull. The strategy dictates whether the company uses full cost pricing, where you meticulously calculate every fraction of a cent it took to manufacture, market, and ship the product, and then add a strict profit margin.
Sort of cost plus pricing.
Yes, or standard cost pricing based on industry norms. But the most critical strategic determinant of pricing is the company's overall market posture.
The text mentions offensive versus defensive postures. How does that fundamentally alter pricing?
If the corporate strategy is offensive, meaning the goal is to aggressively steal market share from competitors and dominate a new sector, the functional marketing strategy will likely dictate penetration pricing.
Okay, explain that.
This means pricing the product artificially low, sometimes even taking a temporary loss on every single unit sold, to flood the market, build a massive user base, and basically drive weaker competitors into bankruptcy.
That's the classic Silicon Valley playbook, right?
Yeah.
Subsidize the cost to acquire the customer and just figure out how to make a profit later.
Exactly. It's aggressive. Conversely, if the corporate strategy is defensive, meaning the company already dominates the market and simply wants to protect its existing cash cow, the pricing strategy will focus on maintaining premium margins and avoiding price wars at all costs. The overall posture dictates the price tag.
We also need to touch on promotion, which involves deciding the mode of advertising, the geographic coverage, and whether the focus is on elevating the overarching corporate brand, pushing a specific product line, or creating a cult following around an individual item. But let's bring R&D, research and development, into this mix.
The key strategic distinction the textbook makes for R&D is the balance between basic research and applied research.
What's the difference?
Basic research is theoretical. It is the exploration of new scientific principles or materials without a specific, immediate commercial product in mind. It's playing in the sandbox to see what's possible.
Just seeing what happens.
Yeah. Applied research, on the other hand, is taking those established principles and actively trying to engineer a specific marketable product to solve a known problem.
And the functional strategy must carefully calibrate the budget between the two.
Right. If the overarching corporate strategy is built on continuous expansion through disruptive new product development, the functional R&D strategy cannot just focus on slightly improving existing products.
It has to swing for the fences.
It must mandate heavy investment in basic research to discover the breakthroughs that will fund the company 10 years from now, while simultaneously funding the applied research to get products on the shelves next year.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at finance, cash flow, marketing, and R&D all laid out like this, the interconnectedness is staggering. They can't exist in silos.
Not at all.
Let's go back to our hypothetical tech company from the intro. You cannot have the marketing department suddenly decide to adopt a highly aggressive, offensive strategy to promote a brand new, wildly expensive product if the financial strategy has simultaneously frozen the cash flow that R&D needs to actually finish inventing the thing.
And the textbook explicitly addresses this tension. It states that the actual process of choosing these strategies is a grueling negotiation between functional managers and business unit managers.
I bet those meetings are intense.
Oh, it is a high-stakes tug-of-war for limited resources. The CFO, the CMO, and the head of R&D are all fighting for the exact same pool of capital. The functional policies that emerge from these negotiations act as the guardrails.
Right.
They are the formalized agreements that ensure the different functional areas are ultimately working toward the same corporate ends rather than actively sabotaging one another.
So the negotiations are finished, the company has its funding, and the marketing team has made a grand promise to the consumer. Now we have to actually build the thing. We're moving into the engine room of the business. Section 3, operational plans and policies. Because marketing can run all the Super Bowl ads they want, but if operations can't deliver the product, the company dies.
The textbook pulls no punches regarding the importance of operations. It defines operations management as the core function of any organization. The core. Its fundamental purpose is profound, yet incredibly simple in concept. It is the process of converting inputs, raw materials, supplies, machines, and human labor into value-added outputs.
Okay.
It encompasses the entire physical life cycle of the business, from sourcing and purchasing to production, distribution, and logistics.
And this is where the textbook drops a perfect piece of exam trivia. It highlights the two major causes of business failure. What are the two primary factors that destroy companies according to this chapter?
Number 1, obsolescence of the product line. Meaning you are highly efficient at producing something nobody wants to buy anymore.
Like making the world's best VCR in 2026.
Exactly. Number 2, Excessive production costs, meaning people want to buy your product, but you spend so much money manufacturing it that you lose money on every single sale.
Both sound fatal.
Both of these fatal flaws are the direct outcome of ineffective production planning. If the operations strategy is flawed, the firm will inevitably fail, regardless of how good the marketing is.
So how does a functional manager prevent excessive costs and obsolescence? It starts with capacity planning. The text breaks down McLean and Thomas's 5 sequential steps for capacity planning. Let's not just list these, let's explore why each step is a potential minefield for a manager.
Okay, step 1 is predicting future demand and competitive reactions. Before you pour concrete for a new factory, you have to forecast how many units of this product the market will actually buy, and you must anticipate what your competitors will do in response to your launch.
Which sounds easy in theory, but predicting human behavior is notoriously difficult.
Right.
If your marketing team overestimates demand, you build a massive factory that sits half empty, bleeding money in maintenance costs.
Right.
If you underestimate demand, you face the nightmare scenario from our intro. Empty shelves, furious customers, and competitors swooping in to steal your market share.
Which is why forecasting is less of a science and more of a highly educated art form. Step 2 is translating those demand estimates into actual capacity needs.
What does that look like?
Based on the forecast, operations must calculate the exact quantity of items that need to be manufactured. But crucially, they must do this while keeping their input limitations constantly in mind.
Give me an example of a limitation.
You might determine that the market wants 1 million units, but you have to ask, do we have the physical plant equipment to build 1 million? Do we have access to enough raw materials? Can we hire enough skilled labor in this specific geographic region?
Ah, okay. Step 3 is creating alternative capacity plans. You never bet the entire company on a single operational blueprint. Depending on the volatility of the market and the realities of your supply chain, management must develop contingency plans.
Always have a backup.
Right. What if demand is 20% higher than expected? What if a key supplier goes bankrupt?
Step 4 is the rigorous evaluation of each alternative plan. The operations team must identify the specific opportunities and threats of each scenario, carefully calculating the additional costs involved in scaling up or scaling down, and comparing those against the potential payoffs.
And finally, step 5 is selecting and implementing the particular capacity plan that best serves the overarching organizational objectives. It is a highly analytical, incredibly stressful sequence of decisions. And a massive part of that capacity is technology and facilities planning. You have to choose the actual machines and the buildings.
Choosing manufacturing equipment is a strategic minefield. The text emphasizes that the decision maker cannot just sit in an office and pick the shiniest, most advanced machine out of a catalog.
They have to get their hands dirty.
They must intimately familiarize themselves with the realities of the manufacturing process.
Because the most advanced machine might be the wrong choice. You have to consider the total operating cost. Does it require proprietary expensive parts? What is the degree of operating skill required to run it?
This is a huge point.
Right. If the machine requires a master's degree in robotics to operate, but your current workforce consists entirely of entry-level assembly line workers, you have a massive strategic mismatch. You either have to fire your workforce and hire highly paid engineers or spend millions on training. Suddenly, that efficient machine is bankrupting the company.
You also have to factor in the ease of operation, maintenance requirements, and safety features. And acquiring this equipment requires serious capital expenditure, which links operations right back to our financial strategy.
Right, it's all connected.
The textbook mentions evaluating these purchases using the internal rate of return, or IRR, and net present value, or NPV methods.
Let's translate those terms for the MBA student because they are foundational. What are IRR and NPV actually doing?
At their core, both methods are mathematical ways to evaluate the time value of money and the risk of an investment. Let's say you want to buy a new robotic welding arm for $1 million. The manufacturer promises it will save you $200,000 a year in labor costs. NPV, net present value, takes those future savings and discounts them back to today's dollars, factoring in inflation and the fact that a dollar today is worth more than a dollar 5 years from now because you could have invested it elsewhere.
Right.
If the NKV is positive, the machine theoretically adds value to the firm. IRR, internal rate of return, is essentially calculating the exact interest rate at which that investment breaks even.
How does that tie back to the hurdle rate we talked about?
Perfect connection. If the IRR of the robotic arm is 12%, but the corporate hurdle rate we discussed earlier is 15%, operations simply cannot buy the machine.
Even replacing an existing broken machine requires a detailed cost-benefit analysis where all the downtime, repair costs, and lost efficiency are converted into a dollar figure and compared against that cutoff rate. Beyond the machines, there's the massive physical facilities decision. Where do we put the factory?
Plant location is one of the most permanent investments a company makes. You cannot simply pack up a steel mill and move it to a different state if you change your mind.
No, you're stuck with it.
The strategic choice of region, community, and exact site is driven by a complex web of factors. Do you locate the plant close to your target markets to reduce shipping costs to the consumer? Or do you locate it close to the raw material supply points to reduce the cost of hauling heavy inputs?
Then you have the design of the plant building itself. Is it designed with modularity in mind for future expansion? Is the ventilation adequate for the chemicals being used? And finally, plant layout. The microscopic, highly optimized arrangement of machinery, conveyor belts, and work centers to ensure the product moves through the assembly process with absolute maximum efficiency, minimizing the physical distance employees have to walk.
And once the factory is built and the machines are humming, operations managers face a relentless, ongoing dilemma that the textbook covers under maintenance and inventory.
Let's look at maintenance first.
Every enterprise requires a rigorous maintenance routine to avoid unexpected breakdowns. An unexpected shutdown costs money in idle labor, missed deadlines, lost sales, and shattered customer trust.
It's disastrous.
The text outlines two primary approaches to mitigate this: carrying excess capacity versus preventive maintenance.
Excess capacity is essentially the brute force method. It means having redundant standby machines or major components fully powered up and ready to go if trouble occurs. If the main boiler fails, the backup boiler immediately takes over.
Exactly.
The obvious downside is that it costs a fortune in capital and floor space to own and maintain machines that intentionally sit idle 99% of the time. You are trading financial efficiency for absolute operational certainty.
The alternative is preventive maintenance. This involves deliberately shutting down production lines to replace worn-out parts before they actually break, based on historical data of normal wear and tear.
Right, you fix it before it breaks.
You anticipate the failure and fix it during a scheduled, convenient time like a weekend or a holiday, rather than waiting for a catastrophic failure during your busiest shift.
Alongside maintaining the physical machines, operations must maintain the flow of materials through inventory management. The text highlights this as a critical area because massive amounts of corporate capital can be trapped in inventory. Raw materials sitting in a warehouse, half-finished products on the assembly line, and unsold finished goods on shelves all represent frozen cash that could be used productively elsewhere.
It's literally money just sitting there collecting dust.
Right. The text lists 3 techniques for managing this: economic order quantity, or EOQ, ABC analysis, and just-in-time, or JIT inventory systems. Let's dig into ABC analysis first because it's highly practical. How does it categorize inventory?
ABC analysis is essentially the application of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule to a warehouse. It recognizes that not all inventory is strategically equal.
Okay, so what are A items?
A items are the vital few. They might only make up 10% of the physical items in the warehouse, but they represent 70% or 80% of the total inventory value. Think of the highly expensive custom microchips in our hypothetical smartwatch.
Right.
These require the strictest control, constant monitoring, and highly secure storage.
And then you have B items, which are moderately important, maybe the glass screens or the battery packs. They require moderate control.
Exactly. And C items are the trivial many. They might make up 70% of the physical bulk in the warehouse, but only represent 5% of the financial value.
Like what?
Think of the screws, the cardboard packaging, or the plastic wrapping. A manager using ABC analysis won't waste expensive labor hours meticulously tracking every single screw. They will apply their management bandwidth proportionally to the value of the items.
Now let's talk about the most famous inventory strategy, JIT, or just-in-time inventory. With JIT, you are attempting to hold near-zero inventory. You arrange for the raw materials to arrive at the factory dock the exact hour they are needed on the assembly line.
It's a beautiful thing when it works.
It maximizes financial efficiency by eliminating warehousing costs. But I have to ask, aren't companies adopting JIT walking a terrifying tightrope? If one cargo ship gets stuck in a canal or a snowstorm delays the trucking route, your entire factory stops dead because you have zero buffer stock. Why on earth do functional managers take that massive operational risk?
It is the defining tension of modern supply chain management, and the answer goes right back to the hierarchy we discussed in Section 1.
The functional serving the corporate.
Exactly. The functional manager takes the risk because the corporate strategy demands it. If the overarching corporate strategy is strict, low-cost leadership, meaning your entire competitive advantage is being the absolute cheapest option on the market, then you must walk the JIT tightrope.
You have no choice.
To win on price, you have to relentlessly squeeze every single cent of waste out of the system, and inventory holding costs are massive waste. The strategy demands you assume the operational risk of a stockout.
But what if your corporate strategy is different?
Well, if your corporate strategy is built on unwavering reliability, premium service, and guaranteed overnight delivery, then a stockout is a fatal strategic failure.
Because you break your promise to the customer.
Exactly. In that case, the functional operations strategy would completely reject JIT. They would intentionally mandate carrying excess capacity and deep buffer inventories. The operations manager accepts the higher holding costs because those costs guarantee the resilience the corporate brand promises. The functional choice always serves the corporate master.
That reframes it perfectly. It's not about which inventory system is objectively best in a vacuum, but which system perfectly aligns with the company's identity and promises. And speaking of corporate promises, let's look at the final piece of operations. Quality management.
Right.
The text mentions Total Quality Management, or TQM, and Six Sigma, which are methodologies where organizations strive to mathematically eliminate variations and produce zero-defect products.
My textbook actually includes a specific prompt here. It says, find out about the quality management practices at McDonald's.
Oh, that's a great example.
It is the perfect, universally understood example of operational strategy. McDonald's global corporate strategy relies entirely on uniformity and predictability. A customer expects a French fry purchased in Tokyo to taste exactly the same, have the same crispness, and be the same temperature as a French fry purchased in Chicago.
All about consistency.
Therefore, their operational functional strategy cannot leave quality up to the discretion of the individual line cook. They can't just tell a teenager to, fry them until they look golden brown.
That'd be a disaster.
The operations strategy mandates rigidly standardized equipment, exact vat temperatures calibrated to the degree, specific fry basket designs, and automated timers that remove human decision-making from the process entirely.
So the relentless quality management on the factory floor, or in this case, the restaurant kitchen, is the functional execution of the corporate promise of absolute consistency. All right, we have funded the company, we have marketed the product, and we have engineered the most efficient, high-quality assembly line possible. But we are missing the most volatile element of all. We are moving into Section 4, the people, personnel or human resource plans and strategies. Because, as mesmerizing as those robotic welding arms and optimized supply chains are, they do not manage themselves. We need human beings.
We do. The textbook uses a very precise quote from scholars Brewster and Rickbell to define HR policies. They describe them as a set of proposals and actions that act as a reference point for managers in their dealings with employees.
Essentially, HR policies are the codified guides to action regarding the human element of the firm.
Right.
The text lists 8 crucial aspects of effective HR policies. I'm going to run through them, but for the listener, pay close attention to the tension between some of these requirements.
It's a tricky list.
It is. Number 1, they must be directly related to the strategic objectives of the firm. Number 2, they must be stated in definite, clear, and easily understandable language. Number 3, they must be comprehensive, providing yardsticks for future action across all departments. Number 4, they must be stable enough so that employees do not fear drastic, overnight changes to their livelihoods.
Stability is huge for morale.
Huge. Number 5, they must be built on facts and sound managerial judgment. Number 6, they must be just, fair, and equitable to all personnel. Number 7, they must be reasonable and actually capable of being accomplished by normal human beings. And number 8, periodic review is essential to keep these policies in tune with rapidly changing circumstances.
If you look closely at that list, you see a profound contradiction that HR managers have to navigate every single day.
Where is the contradiction?
Point 4 demands stability. Employees need to know the rules of the game aren't going to change tomorrow. But point 8 demands continuous periodic review to adapt to a changing world.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Balancing the human psychological need for stability with the corporate strategic need for agility is the core challenge of HR leadership.
And the foundation of meeting that challenge is HR planning. It is the analytical process of identifying the need for and the availability of human resources, so the organization can actually meet its objectives. You have to know who you have, who you need, and who is available in the market. The text cites Jeffrey Mellow's 6 key objectives of HR planning. Let's explore the strategic value of these.
The first objective of HR planning is preventing both overstaffing and understaffing.
Okay.
Overstaffing bleeds capital and creates a sluggish, bureaucratic culture. Understaffing leads to massive employee burnout, plummeting quality, and missed deadlines. Planning aims for the Goldilocks zone.
Just right. The second objective is ensuring the organization has the right number of employees with the precise skills required in the right geographic places at the exact right time. It's a logistical nightmare.
It really is.
If operations builds a new factory in Ohio, HR planning should have started recruiting engineers in Ohio 2 years prior so they are ready the day the doors open.
The third objective is ensuring responsiveness to changes in the broader environment. If artificial intelligence starts automating basic coding tasks, HR planning must foresee that shift and pivot their recruiting efforts away from entry-level coders and toward AI systems architects.
They have to see the future. The fourth objective is providing direction and coherence to all HR activities. Recruitment, training, and compensation shouldn't operate in silos. They should all serve the same plan.
Right.
The fifth is uniting the perspectives of line managers, the people actually running the teams, and staff managers, the administrative support. And the sixth objective is facilitating leadership continuity through rigorous succession planning. A company shouldn't panic when a VP retires, right? HR planning should have been grooming 3 potential replacements for the last 5 years.
Exactly. Once the rigorous planning phase is complete, the functional strategy moves into the execution phase: staffing, training, and development. Staffing involves the actual recruiting and selecting of candidates. The text highlights several strategic issues here.
Like what?
Do we fulfill our labor needs by hiring temporary contractors, giving us immense financial flexibility but lower loyalty? Or do we hire permanent employees, committing to long-term overhead but building institutional knowledge?
Do we recruit internally, promoting from within to boost morale and retain culture? Or do we recruit externally to inject fresh, disruptive perspectives into a stagnant department?
And crucially, the text emphasizes the concept of placement. It warns that placing a highly talented employee in the wrong job can create massive adjustment problems.
Right.
If you place them poorly, they will likely quit in sheer frustration, which represents a massive strategic and financial failure of the entire HR process.
The cost of a bad hire or a bad placement is astronomical when you factor in lost time, training expenses, and lowered team morale. Which brings us to training and development. The text argues that the quality of your training programs directly determines the extent to which your human assets become viable, long-term investments.
Yes.
Effective training requires 4 distinct steps: rigorous needs assessment to determine what skills are actually lacking, the establishment of clear objectives and metrics, the actual delivery of the training, and finally, evaluation to prove the training actually altered employee behavior and improved output.
And once the employees are trained and functioning, we arrive at performance management and compensation. The text makes a really strong, testable point here about the need for flexibility in compensation systems. It argues that overly rigid compensation systems actively inhibit the flexibility needed by modern competitive strategies.
Think about it strategically. If your overarching corporate strategy relies on rapid innovation, pivoting to new markets, and taking bold creative risks, but your compensation system is rigidly tied only to seniority and zero-defect output, the HR strategy is actively sabotaging the corporate strategy.
Yeah, fair.
Employees won't take risks if their bonus depends entirely on never making a mistake. The text states unequivocally, compensation systems must ensure that behaviors that help achieve strategic objectives are appropriately rewarded. You get what you pay for.
Very true.
So what does this all mean? If I can use an analogy here, we often culturally view HR as the complaint department or the administrative team that plans the holiday party and handles payroll. But strategically, structurally, they are the vital architects of the company's human machinery.
I like that.
Putting a highly aggressive, deeply competitive, commission-driven salesperson into a collaborative customer service role that requires endless patience and empathy is exactly like putting diesel fuel into an unleaded engine. It's not just a bad fit. The friction will literally destroy the engine. A functional HR strategy ensures the precise right fuel goes into the right tank.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize their strategic value. And to add a layer of intense complexity, the textbook highlights the most acute HR crisis a functional manager can face: managing human resources during a turnaround strategy.
What happens during a turnaround?
Well, a turnaround implies the company is failing, losing money, and basically fighting for survival. In this scenario, HR faces a brutal, almost impossible paradox.
Unpack the turnaround paradox for the listener. What does it actually look like on the ground?
On one hand, the failing firm has a severe problem of surplus staff. To stop bleeding cash, HR must develop and execute painful retrenchment strategies, laying off hundreds of employees, cutting benefits, and asking the remaining staff to do more work for less pay.
Which means morale absolutely plummets.
It does. But simultaneously, because everyone knows the ship is sinking, the absolute most competent, highly skilled people in the company, the exact people you desperately need to execute the turnaround, start polishing their resumes and fleeing to competitors.
So you are simultaneously trying to fire the dead weight while desperately trying to retain the top talent. But the top talent sees you firing people and gets spooked.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. And to make it worse, the firm finds it incredibly difficult to attract suitable external replacements because top talent doesn't want to join a dying company unless you offer massive financial premiums, which the company cannot afford because they are in retrenchment.
Wow.
Managing that dual crisis-cutting cost while retaining the intellectual capital necessary for survival is the ultimate test of an HR functional strategy.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare to manage. It requires incredible finesse. All right, we have arrived at the final major section, Section 5. And listener, if your attention is drifting, shake off the study fatigue right now, because this is the second major exam focus of the chapter. We are moving into the glue that holds it all together: industrial relations.
We are transitioning from the pristine clinical planning of HR policy manuals to the highly emotional, messy, lived reality of the workplace.
The real world.
Yeah, you can plan staffing matrices and compensation algorithms all day long in an executive boardroom, but how management and labor actually interact on the factory floor dictates whether the business survives the week.
Let's start with the academic definition. The text defines industrial relations as the ongoing interaction between employers, employees, the government, and the institutions and associations, primarily labor unions, through which such interactions are mediated. Why does the textbook elevate this to a key strategic issue rather than just an administrative headache?
Because the fundamental nature of this relationship has a massive, undeniable impact on the morale, motivation, and ultimate productivity of the workforce. The textbook asserts that how organizations manage the day-to-day, frictional aspects of the employment relationship is a central variable affecting their ability to achieve overarching strategic objectives.
The text mentions the primary tools for management in this arena: collective bargaining, grievance procedures, and participative management practices. And it states that the ultimate goal of all these tools is crystal clear: maintaining industrial peace for the effective implementation of the business strategy. But I have to pause here and offer a major fundamental pushback on the entire premise of this chapter.
Okay, go ahead.
In Section 1, we explicitly define the goal of functional strategy as maximizing resource productivity. Throughout this whole deep dive, we have treated capital, machinery, and inventory as resources to be optimized and squeezed for maximum value. But people aren't just inventory. We aren't machines that can be calibrated for 10% more efficiency. Doesn't viewing employees merely as human resources to be maximized fundamentally clash with the goal of maintaining good, peaceful industrial relations? If I am an employee and I know my boss just sees me as a depreciating asset to squeeze productivity out of, my morale is going to plummet and industrial peace is going to shatter. How does a manager reconcile that?
This raises an important question, and the tension you are describing is the central conflict of modern industrial history.
Yeah.
If a manager views employees strictly through a rigid, Taylorist, industrial age lens, viewing human beings merely as cogs in a machine to be driven faster and measured only by output, they will absolutely destroy industrial relations.
That's just dehumanizing.
It is. That mindset leads directly to strikes, high turnover, deliberate sabotage, and unionization efforts built entirely on hostility. The textbook attempts to answer this tension by heavily advocating for participative management practices.
What does participative management actually mean in practice? Is it just a suggestion box in the break room, or is it structural?
Oh, it has to be structural. True strategic HR understands a fundamental economic difference between physical capital and human capital. A robotic welding arm is a depreciating asset.
Right.
The moment you buy it, it starts getting older, slower, and less valuable. A human being, however, is an appreciating asset. If they are trained, motivated, and engaged, their knowledge and efficiency compound over time. They become more valuable every year.
So how does participative management leverage that?
Good industrial relations aren't just about throwing money at a union negotiator once every 3 years to avoid a strike. It is about fundamentally involving employees in the operational process. It means actively soliciting the assembly line workers' ideas on how to optimize the layout because they know the friction points better than the engineer.
That makes total sense.
It means making them feel heard and, crucially, aligning their personal economic and career goals with the corporate strategy. If the employee feels that maximizing their productivity doesn't just enrich distant shareholders, but actively maximizes their own career growth, their bonuses, and their job satisfaction, the inherent conflict between labor and management begins to dissolve.
The friction disappears when the employee genuinely wants the company to win, because they understand that corporate victory translates directly to their personal victory.
Exactly. And for the MBA listener preparing for this exam, you must burn this concept into your memory. Industrial relations are not an afterthought. They are not a separate public relations problem for the legal team to handle.
No.
They are the absolute prerequisite for executing any business strategy. If you do not have industrial peace, your brilliant marketing plan, your optimized supply chain, and your aggressive financial posturing are completely worthless because there will be no one standing on the floor willing to do the actual work. The human element is the ultimate arbiter of strategic success.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of incredibly dense ground today. Let's do a quick, high-level summary of the journey we just took to lock it in. We started by defining functional strategies as the essential blueprints that translate lofty corporate goals into highly specific tactical actions for individual departments.
Right.
We unpacked Gluck and Jauch's 5 reasons for why we need these functional guardrails to prevent chaos. We looked at how financial and marketing strategies engage in a high-stakes negotiation for capital, dictating a company's risk profile and market posture.
The tug of war.
Exactly. We walked the factory floor, exploring how operations must flawlessly balance capacity planning and manage inventory, deciding whether to pay for the safety of excess capacity or walk the terrifying tightrope of just-in-time delivery. We saw how HR acts as the strategic architect of the company's human machinery, attempting to place the right people in the right roles. And finally, we landed on the vital, non-negotiable importance of industrial relations and participative management in actually getting the job done.
It's all connected.
It is. For the MBA student listening, your absolute edge on this exam, and more importantly in your future career, is proving to the professor, and eventually your CEO, that you see the whole board. It's demonstrating that you understand exactly how a lofty strategy concocted in a top-floor boardroom translates to the gritty, physical reality of the shop floor.
I want to leave our listener with a final lingering thought to mull over before they walk into their exam. It builds on a subtle tension hidden deep within the text we just explored.
Let's hear it.
The textbook explicitly states that HR policies require continuous periodic review to keep in tune with rapidly changing circumstances. Agility is demanded. Yet in the very next section, it states that industrial relations require stable, long-term plans and programs to maintain industrial peace.
Oh, wow. The stability versus change paradox.
Exactly. So here is the provocative puzzle for you to ponder. If functional strategies must constantly change to adapt to disruptive markets and aggressive competitors, but industrial peace requires deep stability and long-term assurance, how does a modern manager successfully introduce radical, necessary business transformation without breaking the social contract and triggering a revolt among their employees?
That is tough.
It is a profound, seemingly impossible balancing act, but the manager who solves that equation is the one who ends up leading their industry.
That is a phenomenal, incredibly difficult question to chew on, and exactly the kind of critical thinking that separates a good student from a great business leader. To our listener, thank you for letting us be your study companions today. Take a deep breath, review your notes, and trust that you now understand the mechanics beneath the definitions. We warmly wish you the absolute best of luck on your MBA exam. You've got this.